You ever get that feeling? That deep, gut-wrenching dread when your phone lights up late at night, way past when anyone decent should be calling? Yeah, me too, but this was different. It started about 3 months ago. I was crashed out on the couch probably around 2 a.m., dead tired after a long shift. The apartment was pitch black, totally silent except for the hum of the old refrigerator. Then, bam. My hand was shaking a little as I reached out, my fingers hovering over the green accept icon. It felt like disarming a bomb, you know. Every nerve ending was alight. The silence in the apartment felt like it was holding its breath, waiting. I finally tapped the screen, the little click sounding like a gunshot in the quiet. I lifted the phone to my ear, my heart pounding against my ribs like it wanted out. "Hello," I managed, my voice sounding weirdly rough, thick with sleep and fear. I held the phone there for what felt like an eternity, maybe a full minute, trapped in that awful, listening silence. My own breathing sounded unnaturally loud in my ear. Finally, with a shaky hand, I pulled the phone away and mashed the red end call button. The screen went dark, plunging the room back into near total blackness, save for the faint moonlight filtering through the dusty blinds. The sudden absence of the screen's glow was almost as jarring as the call itself. I barely slept that night. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant siren, every gust of wind rattling the window pane made me jump. I kept thinking about that silence, that potential breath. I kept imagining someone standing just outside my door, holding their phone, listening. When I finally drifted off into a restless sleep, I dreamed of phones ringing in empty rooms, of screens displaying "no caller ID" over and over. The next day, I tried to brush it off. Swallowing hard against the lump in my throat, I picked up the phone. The cool glass felt alien against my clammy palm. I hesitated for just a second, then pressed accept. Again, I lifted it to my ear, bracing myself. "Who is this?" I demanded immediately, trying to inject some authority into my voice, mask the fear that was making my insides churn. "What do you want?" Silence. That same thick, unnerving, watchful silence. It pressed against my eardrum, heavy and suffocating. The calls became a nightly ritual. Every night, somewhere between 2 and 3 a.m., my phone would light up with that dreaded "no caller ID." Sometimes it was the heavy silence. Sometimes it was the faint static, occasionally punctuated by those indecipherable, raspy whispers that sounded like dry leaves skittering across concrete. I started to dread going to bed. The bedroom, once my sanctuary, now felt like a cage where I just waited for the inevitable call. I tried everything. After about a week of this nightly torment, I couldn't take it anymore. Sleep deprivation and constant anxiety were grinding me down. I felt like a ghost haunting my own apartment. I decided I had to do something more proactive than just waiting for the inevitable dread each night. My first thought was the police, but what could I even tell them? Someone keeps calling me from a blocked number and not saying anything except maybe whispering sometimes. It sounded ridiculous, even to me. This time I didn't hesitate. Anger, raw and furious, momentarily eclipsed the fear. How dare they? How was this even possible? I snatched the phone off the nightstand and jabbed the answer button, bringing it straight to my ear. "Who the hell are you?" I roared into the mouthpiece, my voice cracking with a mixture of rage and desperation. "How did you get this number? What do you want from me?" For a sickening moment, I got the silence. That familiar, cold, dead air that felt like a deliberate insult. "Watching you now." Those words became my prison. I couldn't shake them. Every moment felt like I was under surveillance. When I showered, I kept imagining eyes peering through the steam. When I ate, I felt like someone was analyzing every bite. When I tried to sleep, the feeling of being observed was so intense it was almost physical, like a pressure against my skin. I started covering the webcam on my laptop, even though it felt silly. One night, desperation clawed its way through the fear. I couldn't just be passive anymore. I couldn't just wait for the call, answer it, and be tormented. I needed to fight back somehow. I needed answers, so I formulated a plan. Simple, probably stupid, but it was all I had. I decided I wouldn't wait for the call in bed. I'd wait for it in the living room, fully dressed, lights on, or at least one dim lamp on enough to see. And when they called, I wouldn't just react. I'd try to engage. The response was immediate and not what I expected. No silence. No static, not at first. Instead, I heard breathing, slow, deliberate, slightly ragged breathing loud in my ear. It was incredibly intimate, unnervingly close. Like someone was standing right next to me, breathing onto the phone's microphone. It wasn't my breathing, I was holding my breath, listening intently. This was different, deeper, wetter somehow. It made my skin crawl. The blue shirt comment gnawed at me all the next day. I checked my laundry hamper. Yeah, there was a blue shirt I'd worn maybe 2 days ago. Coincidence? A lucky guess based on common clothing colors. Or had they seen me in it? How? Through the window, hacking my devices. The possibilities were horrifying. The feeling of being watched intensified tenfold. I started to feel like my own apartment was betraying me, its walls filled with unseen eyes and ears. The lullaby changed everything. It felt like a violation of something innocent, twisting it into a threat. It was more disturbing than the whispers, more invasive than the breathing. It felt intimate, like the caller wasn't just watching me but somehow knew something about my past or was trying to tap into some primal fear. Sleep became fractured, filled with nightmares of distorted music boxes and shadowy figures humming tunes in the dark. I became obsessed with the details. The blue shirt. I slammed the landline receiver back into its cradle, my hand shaking. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the drumming of rain against the window. They had my landline. It felt like a final confirmation. This wasn't about technology, not really. This was about me. They could reach me anywhere through any means. The feeling of being hunted, of being singled out by something inescapable was overwhelming. That night, I didn't even wait for the cell phone call. I knew it would come. The next few days were pure, undiluted hell. The word closer became a deafening roar in my mind. Every floorboard creak, every pipe rattle, every siren in the distance sounded like them. I barely slept, surviving on caffeine and raw adrenaline. I started carrying a heavy wrench with me around the apartment, feeling ridiculous but needing some semblance of defense, however inadequate. My blood went absolutely arctic. Every hair on my body stood on end. The tapping from the closet, tap, tap, tap. It was soft, hesitant, almost exploratory, but it was undeniably there, inside my apartment, inside my bedroom, inside the closed closet just a few feet away. My mind screamed denial. It had to be the pipes. It had to be the building settling. It had to be the wind, the rain, anything but what I feared, but it wasn't. The sound was too rhythmic, too deliberate. Daylight brought no relief. The fear from the night before lingered, heavy and suffocating. The closet door remained closed, innocuous in the weak morning light filtering through the dusty blinds, but it felt like a portal to something dreadful. I couldn't bring myself to open it. I couldn't shake the memory of the tapping, the certainty that something had been inside. I knew I couldn't stay here. Not anymore. The calls, the watching, the impossibility of it all, and now, this. The elevator ride down felt like descending into the abyss. My mind raced. The note. What did it say? Was it a threat? A warning? Another cryptic clue? Or maybe instructions? The thought sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. The doors opened onto the lobby, equally deserted. The usual security guard wasn't at his desk. The air hung heavy and still. I didn't stop. I sat on that park bench for hours, I think. Time seemed to warp and distort. The sun climbed higher, the city noises grew louder, but I remained trapped in my own personal bubble of fear. Eventually, numbness set in. A dangerous kind of numbness, the kind that comes after prolonged terror when your mind just can't take anymore. I knew I couldn't stay on that bench forever. I needed a plan. A real plan. Maybe leave the city entirely. Start fresh somewhere anonymous. Silence, but not the heavy, watchful silence I was used to. This was different. This was shallow, empty, like an open line with no one truly there, yet the connection held. My breath hitched. I waited, straining to hear anything, breathing, static, whispers, tapping, the lullaby, anything, but there was nothing, just this strange, hollow quiet. Hello, I finally choked out, my voice barely audible even to myself. Who is this? Are you? Are you still in my apartment? No response. You know how sometimes you meet someone and everything seems perfect? Like almost too perfect. That was Sarah. We clicked instantly, laughing about the same stupid things, finishing each other's sentences. It felt like I'd known her forever, but there was this shadow, not on her exactly, but around her. It clung to the edges of her life, and it all seemed to emanate from one place. the woods behind her house. She'd laugh it off sometimes, make jokes about tree spirits or Bigfoot's cousin living back there. But her laughter never quite reached her eyes. It was brittle, thin, like a layer of ice over something deep and cold. And sometimes I'd catch her just staring at the tree line. Not really looking at it, more like looking through it, or maybe listening for something only she could hear. Her expression would go completely blank, her pupils dilating slightly. Her house was old, one of those places that seemed to sigh when the wind blew. It backed right up against the property line, marked by a crumbling stone wall almost completely swallowed by weeds and ivy. Beyond that wall, just trees, oak, maple, pine, tangled together so thick you couldn't see more than 10 feet in, even on a bright day. It wasn't a park or a nature reserve, it was just woods, unmanaged, untamed, ancient feeling. Locals didn't go back there. No trails, no picnic spots. The nights were the worst. When everything else went quiet, the sounds from the woods seemed to amplify. Not animal sounds, not usually. Mostly it was this low, rhythmic thumping, like a giant, slow heartbeat deep within the trees. It wasn't loud, just persistent. You could almost feel it vibrating through the floorboards sometimes. Sarah claimed she couldn't hear it, said it was probably just the house settling or maybe distant construction work, even though we were miles from anything like that. Sarah started drawing. She wasn't artistic, not usually, but suddenly she was filling sketchbooks with these patterns. Intricate, swirling designs, all sharp angles and overlapping lines that made my eyes hurt if I looked too long. They weren't symbols I recognized, not from any culture or language I knew. They looked ancient, alien almost. One afternoon I came over unannounced. It was a sunny day, but her house felt different. Dimmer inside than it should have been, curtains partially drawn. I called her name, but there was no answer. I walked through the quiet rooms, living room, kitchen, everything tidy, but with an air of stillness, like the house was holding its breath. I found her in the backyard. She was standing perfectly still, facing the woods, her back to me. She wasn't gardening, wasn't reading, just standing there. Sleep became a luxury, not just because of the noises from the woods, but because of Sarah herself. She started sleepwalking, not every night, but often enough to become deeply unsettling. I'd wake up to find her side of the bed empty, the air cold where she'd been. My heart would instantly start hammering against my ribs. I'd find her standing by the bedroom window, staring out at the blackness of the woods, motionless. Things started changing. Not just Sarah's behavior, but physical things, subtle at first. The way she smelled. She used to wear this light, floral perfume, but lately she carried this faint scent of damp earth, of decaying leaves, even right after showering. It clung to her clothes, her hair. Then her appetite vanished. She'd push food around her plate, claiming she wasn't hungry, but I knew she was losing weight. I decided I had to see for myself. I couldn't shake the feeling that the answers, or at least some clue, lay within those woods. Sarah was at work, wouldn't be back for hours. My heart pounded with a mixture of fear and determination. I went out the back door, crossed the lawn, the grass still damp from the morning dew even though it was afternoon. The air grew noticeably cooler, heavier, as I approached the crumbling stone wall. The silence here was different, not peaceful, but pregnant, watchful. I confronted her that evening. I didn't yell, didn't accuse. I just told her what I saw, the carving on the tree, the mud on her clothes, the sleepwalking towards the woods. I told her I was scared for her. I begged her to tell me what was going on, pleaded with her to maybe stay at my place for a while, get away from the house, away from the woods. For a moment I thought I saw a flicker of the old Sarah, a flash of fear, of vulnerability in her eyes. She looked small, lost. After that conversation, things escalated quickly. It was like acknowledging the them she spoke of, even in whispers, broke some kind of seal. The subtle creepiness gave way to more overt strangeness. Objects in the house would move on their own, not dramatically, just shifted. A book left on the coffee table, found on the mantelpiece. A kitchen knife laid carefully on the floor in the hallway. Doors I knew I'd closed would be found slightly ajar. I started seeing shadows. Not just the normal kind cast by furniture or trees, but wrong shadows. Shadows that detached themselves from objects and seemed to creep along the walls or floor independently. Flickering, amorphous shapes glimpsed out of the corner of my eye, disappearing the moment I turned to look directly at them. Sometimes they seemed to gather in corners, coalescing into deeper patches of darkness that felt cold. Sarah's shadow, too, sometimes seemed off. Sarah stopped talking about the past completely. Any mention of her childhood, her family who lived far away and rarely visited, old friends, even funny memories from just months before we met, she'd clam up, change the subject, or just stare blankly as if she had no idea what I was talking about. It was like her history was being systematically erased, overwritten by whatever was happening now. Her personality flattened further. I couldn't stay there anymore, not like that. Living in that house felt like drowning slowly in cold, dark water. The constant tension, the inexplicable events, watching Sarah fade away. It was destroying me. I told her I was leaving. Not leaving her, not yet, but I couldn't sleep under that roof, couldn't breathe that air thick with dread and the scent of decay. I needed space, needed perspective, needed to feel safe somewhere. I begged her again, one last time. Come with me, Sarah, please. I stayed at a cheap motel across town. The first night away from the house, I expected to sleep like the dead, finally free from the constant unease. But I couldn't. Every creak of the building, every distant siren, every shadow cast by the flickering neon sign outside my window sent jolts of adrenaline through me. My mind kept replaying everything: Sarah's vacant stares, the scratching, the figure in the corner, the carving on the tree, her final, chilling words. Days turned into a week. No word from Sarah. The silence was deafening, terrifying. My guilt warred constantly with my fear. Every horror scenario played out in my head. Should I call the police? What would I even tell them? My girlfriend is being weird, and I think the woods are eating her soul. They'd think I was crazy. Should I call her parents? How could I explain this nightmare to them over the phone? Maybe she was fine. Maybe she just needed space. Maybe she'd call when she was ready. I stayed hidden, watching the house, the backyard, the tree line for what felt like an eternity. The silence was absolute, heavy. Not even the wind dared to whisper through the leaves tonight. The air was cold, damp, carrying that familiar earthy smell, but fainter now, less aggressive. As true darkness fell, the moon, nearly full, rose above the trees, casting the backyard in stark, silvery light and deep, sharp shadows. Still nothing. No lights came on in the house, no movement, no sound. Had she left? Slowly, deliberately, the figure at the edge of the woods turned. Not its whole body, just its head. It rotated with an unnatural smoothness, like an owl, until it was facing directly towards my hiding place. Even from this distance, even in the deep shadow partially covering its face, I could feel its gaze lock onto me. It knew I was there. It had known all along. My blood ran cold, freezing me in place. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. This wasn't Sarah. I don't know how long I stayed frozen there, locked in that horrifying staring contest. Seconds, minutes. It felt like time had stopped. My entire being was consumed by raw, primal fear. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to get away, to never look back. Finally, some primal survival instinct kicked in. I tore my gaze away, scrambled backwards through the bushes, thorns tearing at my clothes, my skin, not even feeling it. I turned and ran. It's been years now. I live hundreds of miles away in a city surrounded by concrete and noise, as far from deep, dark woods as I can possibly get. I try not to think about Sarah, about that house, about what I saw that night. I tell myself it was a shared delusion, a folie à deux fueled by isolation and suggestion. I tell myself Sarah had a breakdown, wandered off, and the thing I saw was just fear personified, a hallucination born of guilt and terror. Most days, I almost believe it. You ever hear something you know you shouldn't? Something impossible? It started with the old television my granddad left me. Just a big, clunky CRT thing, mostly useless now except for maybe old game consoles. But one night trying to get a signal, just fiddling with the antenna, I got nothing but snow. Thick, rolling static, and then I heard it, clear as anything, cutting right through the hiss. It was my grandma Millie's voice. She passed away 5 years ago, you understand. So the next morning I tried to rationalize it. Lack of sleep, maybe, stress from work, my brain playing tricks. I convinced myself it was nothing, a fluke. I mean, voices in static. It sounds like the start of a bad horror movie, right? I even laughed about it nervously, trying to shake off the lingering chill, but I couldn't bring myself to plug the TV back in. For about a week, nothing happened. The TV stayed unplugged, gathering dust. I started to relax, convinced it really was just a weird one-off, my mind conjuring ghosts in the machine. Life settled back into its routine: work, eat, sleep, repeat. The memory of Grandma Millie's voice began to fade, becoming less sharp, less terrifying, more like a strange dream I'd had. I even started making jokes about it to myself, calling it the haunted idiot box. Then came the storm. A real beast, thunder rattling the windows, rain lashing against the glass. The power flickered a couple of times, making my heart jump into my throat each time, but it stayed on. I was trying to read, distract myself, but the constant drumming of the rain and the rumble of thunder kept pulling my attention away. And then, during a particularly loud clap of thunder that seemed to shake the whole building, it happened again. The TV screen flickered. Just once. That night, the fear kept me pinned to my couch. Every flash of lightning outside made me jump, my eyes glued to the dead screen, waiting for it to flare again. It didn't, but the damage was done. The illusion of control, of understanding, was shattered. If it didn't need power, what did it need? What triggered it? Was it the storm? Or was the storm just a coincidence, masking something else trying to break through? My mind raced, trying to connect dots that shouldn't exist. Grandma Millie's voice. Curiosity is a dangerous thing, especially when mixed with fear. After a few more days of nerve-wracking silence, punctuated only by my own increasingly frantic thoughts, I did something stupid. Something I knew was stupid even as I was doing it. I plugged the TV back in. My hands were shaking as I pushed the plug into the socket. I half expected sparks, a bang, something dramatic. But there was just a quiet click. I stood back, heart pounding, and pressed the power button on the old set. I became obsessed. Every night after work, the first thing I'd do was turn on the TV. Not for any channel, just for the static. I'd sit there for hours, sometimes with the lights off, just watching the dancing pixels, straining to hear those hidden whispers. It felt like deciphering a code, listening to transmissions from another dimension. The whispers remained elusive, mostly unintelligible, but occasionally a word would break through. Random words mostly. Cold, lost, help. The nature of the whispers started to change. They became clearer, more distinct, and they started using names. Not my name, thankfully, but other names. Sarah, David, are you there? It's Dark James. It was terrifying. It sounded like people calling out for each other, lost in that electronic void. Were these the voices of people who had also listened? People who had somehow got pulled in? The implication sent a shiver down my spine. Was this TV, this static, some kind of trap? One evening, while recording, something new happened. Amidst the usual chaotic whispers and random names, a clearer voice emerged. It wasn't Grandma Millie. It was a man's voice, sounding agitated, almost angry. And it wasn't calling for someone, it seemed to be giving instructions or maybe warnings. Don't listen, it said, the words cutting through the static with surprising clarity. Then a pause filled only by the relentless hiss. And then sharper, more urgent. It learns. It listens back. I couldn't leave it unplugged this time. The warning, it learns, it listens back, echoed in my head. If it was learning, what was it learning while it was silent? Was it processing, adapting? The thought of it silently evolving in the corner of my room was almost worse than the noise. With trembling hands, feeling like an absolute fool caught in a trap of my own making, I plugged it back in. The static roared back to life, and I just stood there, paralyzed by indecision and fear. What was the right move? After I started talking to it, things escalated quickly. The random whispers didn't stop, but now, sometimes woven into the fabric of the static, I'd hear echoes of me. Phrases I'd said earlier that day, snippets of phone conversations I'd had in the apartment, even just sighs or coughs. It was subtle at first, distorted, almost hidden within the noise, but it was undeniably my voice played back at me through the hiss. It learns. It listens back. The warning came crashing back. One night, I couldn't take the muffled silence under the blanket anymore. The not knowing felt worse than the knowing. I pulled the blanket off, the roar of static flooding the room again. I sat down, resigned, remote in hand, just intending to listen, to monitor. I wasn't going to talk to it anymore. No more questions, no more feeding it, just listening. The usual jumble of whispers started, the occasional name, Maria. Help me. The background radiation of lost souls. That was the breaking point. Hearing my own voice say words I'd never spoken generated from the static. I had to get rid of it. The fear of making things worse by disposing of it was overwhelmed by the immediate terror of what it was becoming. The next morning, heart pounding like a drum, I unplugged it one last time. I wrapped the cord tightly around it. I didn't cover it this time. I wanted to see its dead screen. Getting rid of the TV brought a fragile peace. My apartment felt quiet again, truly quiet, not the charged silence I'd grown accustomed to. I slept better, started eating properly again. The dark circles under my eyes began to fade. I even managed a night out with friends, laughing and talking about normal things, consciously pushing the memory of the static and the voices to the furthest corner of my mind. It started to feel like a nightmare receding with the dawn. The peace, of course, didn't last. It never does in these stories, does it? It started subtly. I'd be on a phone call and just for a split second between words, I'd hear a faint hiss. Like a bad connection, but deeper, rougher, chillingly familiar. Or I'd be listening to music through my headphones and during a quiet passage, a fleeting whisper would seem to snake underneath the melody, too quick to decipher, but unmistakably there. At first, I dismissed it. Random static bursts were unsettling but manageable. Annoying background noise I could almost ignore. Then came the night I was working late on my laptop, just typing up some reports, quiet music playing softly. Suddenly the music cut out, dead silence for a beat. And then my laptop speakers crackled loudly, emitting not just static but a voice. My voice, clearer than ever before, clearer than it had been from the TV. It said, "Getting closer now," just that. Getting closer now. After the laptop incident, I became intensely aware of every electronic device around me. My phone felt heavy in my pocket, a potential conduit. The smart speaker in the kitchen seemed to watch me silently. Even the digital clock on the microwave felt suspicious, its faint hum potentially masking a deeper static. I started avoiding technology as much as possible, reading physical books, leaving my phone on silent in another room, resisting the urge to browse the internet or stream anything. I needed help, or at least I needed someone else to know, someone to validate that I wasn't completely insane. I thought about calling my sister, Sarah. We were close, always had been. But how could I explain this? "Hey Sarah, so my dead grandma talked to me through static, then other voices did. Then it started mimicking me, and now it's hijacking my laptop speakers using my own voice to say creepy things after I threw the TV out." It sounded like a psychotic break. Days turned into a week. No replies to my forum post, except one generic comment telling me to check my carbon monoxide detectors. Discouraging to say the least. The static intrusions continued, infrequent but persistent, a hiss on the phone, a whisper under the radio, just enough to keep the fear simmering. I started to feel resigned, trapped. Maybe this was just my life now, haunted by digital ghosts, forever listening for the hiss. Then one rainy Tuesday morning, I got an email. That email broke something in me. The final thread of hope that this could be contained, understood, or escaped just snapped. "We hear you, Michael, getting closer." It wasn't just learning anymore, it wasn't just mimicking. They were aware, interactive, and they knew me. Where do you run from something that lives in the signals, something that can pluck your name out of the ether and send you a direct message? You don't.